Hello, my name is Len Davis. I'm a senior partner in the Doylestown, Pennsylvania law firm of Drake, Hileman Davis, PC. I head up the elder law and nursing home planning departments of the firm. In this video series, we are discussing how to qualify for Medicaid benefits while preserving an inheritance for your children. If you or a loved one may be in need of skilled nursing care in Pennsylvania, now or in the future, this video is for you. To clarify, in this video we will be talking about Medicaid for individuals over the age of 65. There are other Medicaid programs for other people, but in this video we will only be talking about Medicaid for seniors. In our prior two videos we covered some important introductory and foundational topics about Medicaid that apply to everyone watching, whether you are single or married. If you have not watched the prior videos, I recommend that you go back and watch them in order before watching this video. In this video, we will cover why and how you should purchase a prepaid funeral. All dollar figures mentioned in this video are based on 2020 law. And a brief disclaimer, this video is for general information purposes only and is not intended to provide legal advice. So let's talk about our goal. First, let's face it, all of us will eventually need a funeral and/or other burial arrangements of some kind. Pre-planning and paying for your funeral takes a lot of stress off of loved ones who may not have funds readily available to pay for your funeral or burial. And purchasing a prepaid funeral allows you to reduce your resources substantially and quickly in order to qualify for Medicaid. In fact, it may allow you to qualify for Medicaid retroactively for up to 3 calendar months prior to the month the application for benefits was filed. In short, prepaying for your funeral is a good way to spend down resources to get qualified for Medicaid while paying for something you need anyway, rather than just paying all of your money to the nursing home. In fact, the first Medicaid qualifying strategy I recommend to all my clients is purchasing a prepaid funeral or setting up an irrevocable funeral reserve. Our goal is to avoid the situation of you or a loved one going into a nursing home and spending down all your resources and then dying with little or no money left over to pay for your funeral and burial. I have seen this happen. What that means is that your grieving family will have to pay for your funeral out of their own pocket. Prepaying for your funeral is only one tool that we can use to qualify for Medicaid while preserving an inheritance. But it is an important and powerful strategy that almost everyone can use. And it illustrates some key concepts that are used for other Medicaid qualifying strategies. It involves 3 key concepts. 1. Spending down excess resources in ways that benefit you or your loved ones instead of just paying the funeral home. 2. Converting countable resources into non-countable resources. While 3. Not triggering the 5-year look-back period for gifts. Let's start by talking about prepaid funerals. Here are the key points to understand about prepaid funerals. First, the money or assets you use to purchase a prepaid funeral is not considered to be an available resource for Medicaid. Second, you should select a local and reputable funeral director. It will be much easier for you to plan your own funeral and burial than to force your grieving family to do it after you die. Third, you can decide what funeral services you do and don't want. You can also lock in the prices for these services. This should prevent increases due to inflation. Allowed funeral and burial expenses include the funeral services themselves, and also such items as a casket, cemetery plot, flowers, and obituary. Some funeral directors may allow you to prepay for a funeral meal. Fourth, determine how much you are allowed to spend for your funeral and for what purposes. For Medicaid qualification purposes, Pennsylvania limits the amount of a prepaid funeral to the average costs in the local county, which are published online, plus 25%, or the local limit. The local limit in Bucks County is $15,860. Now there are some exceptions. You can set aside additional funds that exceed the local limit in order to A. Cover transportation costs of your body for burial in a distant community, B. Cover travel costs, food, lodging, and an honorarium for a clergy member who was a family friend needing to travel in order to participate in the funeral, or C. Make a reasonable gift to a house of worship for use of its facility for your funeral service. Now, fifth, don't spend more than the local limit on your funeral. Doing so could result in a period of ineligibility for Medicaid benefits. Sixth, don't spend more on a prepaid funeral and related services than you really want or need. If there are excess funds left over, they will become part of your estate and will be subject to estate recovery after you die. So now let's talk about irrevocable funeral trusts. This is another approach. Rather than prepaying your funeral at your selected funeral home, you can establish an irrevocable burial reserve. The concept goes by different names and there are different ways to implement it. Although the law refers to it as an irrevocable burial reserve, I refer to it as an irrevocable funeral trust. Here is what you should know about setting up an irrevocable funeral trust. First, an irrevocable funeral trust must be established by means of a contract with a financial institution, such as a bank, or a funeral director, and must be designated solely for funeral and burial expenses. The contract must state that the funds cannot be withdrawn before death unless the purchaser moves out of Pennsylvania. I recommend that you sign an irrevocable funeral trust agreement with a qualifying financial institution. Although you can also set up an irrevocable burial reserve account directly with a funeral director, there will be a problem if the funeral director goes out of business. Second, an irrevocable funeral trust allows for the funeral home you select to be changed later. This would be especially important if the funeral home you select goes out of business or if you move. Third, an irrevocable funeral trust also allows for the funeral and burial services you select to be changed later. Changing selected funeral services may not be an option with a prepaid funeral. However, unlike a prepaid funeral, this approach does not allow you to lock in prices for your funeral or burial services. Fourth, funeral and burial expenses that can be paid via an irrevocable funeral trust include all of the expenses that you can prepay via a prepaid funeral, which I discussed before. Fifth, an irrevocable funeral trust can be funded by assigning a life insurance policy to the trust that won't pay out until your passing. If an irrevocable funeral trust is established, I believe that the trust should be both the owner and the beneficiary of the assigned policy. If premiums are still being paid on the policy, gifts will need to be made to the trust in turn in order to pay those premiums. Sixth, the dollar limits for funding an irrevocable funeral trust are the same as those discussed above for prepaid funerals. Seventh, to the extent the value of the assets used to fund a funeral trust exceeds the local limit, the County Assistance Office caseworker will treat the excess as uncompensated value, which may result in a period of ineligibility for Medicaid. Eighth, excess funds not actually spent to pay for funeral or burial costs are presumed to belong to the decedent's estate and are subject to Pennsylvania's Medical Assistance State Recovery Program. Now note, some practitioners believe that if the irrevocable funeral trust designates a family member or members as the ultimate beneficiary of the trust, because the trust avoids probate, the remaining funds in the trust are not subject to Pennsylvania's Medical Assistance Estate Recovery Program. However, the law is not clear on this issue. You should discuss the beneficiary designation of the Irrevocable Funeral Trust carefully with your attorney. Let me give you an example. Mrs. D establishes an $18,000 Irrevocable Funeral Trust 3 months before application for Medicaid. The local average cost of a funeral and burial is $10,000. Adding 25% to that amount provides a limit of $12,500. The county assistance officer determines that the excess $5,500 is uncompensated value. The county assistance officer then determines the period of ineligibility using Medicaid's formula, that is $5,500 divided by the current average Medicaid daily pay rate of $352.80 per day, resulting in 15 days of ineligibility. The period of ineligibility begins on the date Mrs. D is otherwise eligible for Medicaid. Well, that will conclude this video, folks. Thank you for watching. Be sure to tune into my other videos. If you have any questions or concerns about anything I said in this video, please contact me by calling my office at 215-348-2088 or by emailing me at ldavis@dhdlaw.com. There are also additional resources on our website at dhdlaw.com. If you or someone you know needs nursing home or Medicaid planning, please contact me as soon as possible to set up a no-obligation initial consultation. Again, that number to call is 215-348-2088. We can help you establish a prepaid funeral or an irrevocable funeral trust that will help you to efficiently and effectively qualify for Medicaid while preserving an inheritance for your loved ones.